What if I told you that one of the biggest reasons startups fail has nothing to do with money, nothing to do with competition, and nothing to do with having a bad idea? In fact, thousands of startups fail every year after building products that customers never wanted in the first place. Not because the founders weren't smart, not because they didn't work hard, but because they spent months, sometimes years, perfecting something nobody actually needed. Imagine pouring your savings into a business, working late every night, sacrificing weekends, only to launch your product and hear your first customer say, "It's impressive, but it's not something I'd use." That single sentence has destroyed more startups than a lack of funding ever has. Eric Ries experienced this firsthand. After watching startup after startup waste enormous amounts of time, money, and talent, he realized that entrepreneurs were asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, "How do we build the perfect product?" they should first ask, "Are we building something people actually want?" That simple shift became the foundation of the Lean Startup, a book that completely changed how companies, from tiny startups to billion-dollar businesses, develop products and innovate. Its core message is surprisingly simple. Stop guessing. Start learning. Because in business, the company that learns the fastest usually wins. And before we begin, if you enjoy learning powerful lessons from the world's greatest books on entrepreneurship, business, psychology, and personal growth, make sure to subscribe. Every week, I summarize the best books so you can gain years of knowledge in just a few minutes. Now, let's begin. Imagine two entrepreneurs with exactly the same business idea. Both are talented, both are ambitious, both have enough money to build their product. The first entrepreneur spends an entire year trying to make everything perfect. Every feature is polished, every design detail is carefully refined. Nothing is released until everything feels ready. The second entrepreneur takes a completely different approach. After only a few weeks, he launches a version that feels unfinished. It has fewer features. The design isn't perfect. He knows people will criticize it. To most people, this sounds like a terrible strategy. Surely the first entrepreneur has a much better chance of succeeding. Eric Ries argues the opposite. Because while the first entrepreneur spends months making assumptions, the second starts collecting facts. Every customer becomes a source of feedback. Every complaint becomes a lesson. Every mistake becomes an opportunity to improve. Instead of guessing what people want, he learns directly from the people he's trying to serve. And that's one of the biggest ideas in this entire book. Successful startups don't win because they have better ideas. They win because they learn faster than everyone else. To make this possible, Ries introduces one of the most influential concepts in modern entrepreneurship: the minimum viable product, or MVP. Many people misunderstand what an MVP really is. They think it means creating something cheap or low quality. It doesn't. An MVP is simply the smallest version of your product that allows you to test your biggest assumption. Imagine you want to open a restaurant. Most people would rent a building, hire staff, design the interior, print menus, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and only then discover whether customers actually like the food. A lean startup founder would do the opposite. They might start by cooking the same meals at home and selling them at a local market or through a small pop-up event. Within a single weekend, they would learn more about customer demand than months of planning could ever teach them. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is learning. Because every dollar spent before discovering what customers truly want is a risk. The sooner you learn, the sooner you improve. And the faster you improve, the greater your chances of building something people genuinely love. Another idea that completely changes the way entrepreneurs think is something Eric Ries calls the build, measure, learn cycle. At first, it sounds almost too simple. You build something. You measure how people respond. Then you learn from the results. But surprisingly, most startups never complete that cycle. They build, then they keep building. They add more features. They redesign the interface. They spend months polishing details, yet they rarely stop to ask the most important question. Are we actually making the product better for our customers? The lean startup completely changes that mindset. Instead of trying to prove your idea is right, you actively try to discover where it's wrong. That may sound discouraging, but it's actually one of the fastest ways to succeed. Because finding a mistake after 1 week is infinitely better than discovering it after 2 years. Failure itself isn't expensive, delayed failure is. Imagine you're creating a fitness app. Your team believes users want advanced workout plans, nutrition tracking, progress charts, social challenges, and dozens of customization options, so you spend 8 months building every feature you can imagine. Finally, launch day arrives. Thousands of people download the app, but after a few days, almost everyone stops using it. When you study the data, you discover something surprising. Users didn't care about all those advanced features. They only wanted a simple app that reminded them to exercise every morning. Everything else consumed months of work that added almost no value. Now imagine a different approach. Instead of building the complete platform, you release a very basic version with only daily reminders. Within days, customers tell you exactly what they like and exactly what they don't. Your next version becomes smarter, then the next, and the next. Little by little, the product evolves into something customers genuinely love, not because you guessed correctly, but because your customers taught you what they actually needed. That's the real power of the build, measure, learn cycle. Every version teaches you something. Every experiment makes the next decision easier. And over time, those small improvements create extraordinary businesses. Another lesson Eric Ries emphasizes is that your first idea is rarely your best idea. Many entrepreneurs fall in love with their original vision. They become emotionally attached to it. Even when customers clearly tell them something isn't working, they refuse to change direction. Ries argues that this is one of the biggest reasons startups fail. He introduces a concept called the pivot. A pivot doesn't mean giving up. It means changing your strategy while staying committed to your mission. Imagine you're sailing across the ocean. Your destination remains the same. But if the wind changes, you adjust your sails. You don't stubbornly continue in the wrong direction. Business works exactly the same way. Suppose you build an app for university students. After several months, you notice something unexpected. Teachers are using the app far more than students. Most founders would ignore that information because it doesn't fit their original plan. A lean startup founder sees an opportunity. Instead of forcing the market to accept the original idea, they redesign the product for teachers. That single decision could transform an average startup into an extraordinary company. History is filled with companies that became successful only after making major pivots. What initially looked like failure became valuable feedback, and feedback is one of the most valuable assets an entrepreneur can ever receive. Another mistake Ries warns against is confusing activity with progress. Many founders are incredibly busy. They attend meetings, answer emails, create presentations, discuss new ideas, work late every night. Their calendars are completely full, yet months later, the business hasn't really moved forward. Being busy isn't the same as creating value. The only question that truly matters is this: what have we learned that will help us build a better business? If you can't answer that question, all your hard work may simply be keeping you busy instead of moving you forward. This brings us to one of the book's most important ideas: validated learning. Many entrepreneurs trust opinions. Eric Ries trusts evidence. There's a huge difference. Someone might tell you they love your product but never use it again. Another person might say almost nothing, yet become a loyal customer who uses your product every day. Which person's opinion matters more? The second one, because actions always tell the truth. Words don't always do that. That's why successful entrepreneurs don't just ask customers what they think. They observe what customers actually do. Real behavior reveals real demand. This is also why data matters. But not all data is useful. Imagine you launch a website. A month later, you proudly announce that 1 million people visited your homepage. It sounds impressive, but if almost nobody bought your product, that number means very little. Now imagine another company with only 10,000 visitors. Half of them become paying customers. Which business is healthier? Obviously the second one. Eric Ries calls the first kind of numbers vanity metrics. They make you feel successful, but they don't help you make better decisions. Instead, entrepreneurs should focus on metrics that explain why customers stay, why they leave, why they buy, and why they don't. Good data doesn't flatter your ego. Good data helps you improve. By the end of the book, one message becomes impossible to ignore. Entrepreneurship isn't about having the perfect idea. It's about learning faster than your competitors. The companies that survive aren't always the biggest. They aren't always the smartest. And they certainly aren't always the ones with the most funding. They're the ones that adapt the fastest, because every successful business is built through hundreds of small experiments. Some fail, some succeed. Each one teaches you something valuable. And every lesson moves you one step closer to building a product that people truly want. That's the real lesson behind the lean startup. Success doesn't come from guessing correctly on day one. It comes from staying curious, listening to your customers, testing your assumptions, and improving continuously. In the end, the winners aren't the companies that build the perfect product first. They're the companies that never stop learning. If you enjoyed this summary and want to discover more timeless lessons from the world's greatest books on entrepreneurship, investing, psychology, and personal growth, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.